Recently, tensions between U.S. President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy have escalated, significantly impacting international relations and the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. The shift in U.S. policy and Trump's remarks have created uncertainty not just for Ukraine, but for NATO and Western alliances as well. The ramifications of this growing divide could reshape the geopolitical landscape in ways that are not yet fully understood. President Trump has made controversial remarks about President Zelenskyy and Ukraine's role in the war. He referred to Zelenskyy as a dictator and suggested that Ukraine should not have resisted Russia's invasion, implying that Zelenskyy's decision to fight was a mistake. This statement is not only factually questionable but also politically damaging, as it undermines the legitimacy of Ukraine's struggle for sovereignty. Trump's rhetoric appears to align with a broader strategy of distancing the U.S. from direct involvement in the conflict, which may embolden Russia while weakening Ukraine's negotiating power. He also criticized Zelenskyy for rejecting a U.S. proposal regarding mineral extraction, arguing that it was the best opportunity to secure Ukraine's future. The relationship between the U.S. and Ukraine has become increasingly strained. President Trump has shifted U.S. policy by engaging directly with Russia while sidelining Ukraine, raising concerns among European officials. This is a marked departure from previous administrations that had emphasized strong support for Ukraine. The implications of this shift extend beyond Ukraine and could impact NATO's unity, particularly among Eastern European nations that rely heavily on U.S. military assurances. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance and several Republican leaders have echoed Trump's sentiments, criticizing Zelenskyy and calling for new elections in Ukraine. If Ukraine is pressured into holding premature elections under the stress of war, it could lead to political instability at a critical moment. European leaders have expressed concern over Trump's approach. French Prime Minister François Bayrou warned that the risk of war is at its highest since 1945, while Denmark has increased defense spending in response. These actions suggest that European nations see a potential rollback of U.S. support and are preparing for the worst. United Nations and European officials have defended the legitimacy of Zelenskyy's democratic election, while Australia has dismissed Trump's stance and reaffirmed its support for Ukraine. The international response to Trump's rhetoric indicates a divergence in strategic thinking between the U.S. and its allies, which could weaken the cohesion of Western policy towards Russia. Russian officials have welcomed Trump's statements. Dmitry Medvedev, deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council, praised Trump for understanding Moscow's position in the three-year-long conflict. This reaction is telling. It suggests that Russia perceives Trump's statements as a sign of weakening Western resolve. If Trump's comments are interpreted as a signal that U.S. support for Ukraine is wavering, it could embolden Russian forces to escalate their military operations, believing that Western backing will no longer be as strong or committed as before. The deteriorating U.S.-Ukraine relationship may affect future military aid and diplomatic support, complicating Ukraine's position in ongoing peace negotiations with Russia. Some officials in the Trump administration have called for new elections in Ukraine, questioning Zelenskyy's leadership. While democratic processes are important, calls for elections in the midst of an existential war seem impractical at best and dangerously destabilizing at worst. A divided Ukraine would benefit Russia, which has long sought to undermine Kyiv's government from within. Beyond the political rhetoric, the situation on the ground in Ukraine remains dire. The war has led to significant loss of life, displacement of millions, and widespread destruction of infrastructure. Ukraine's ability to defend itself relies heavily on continued Western aid, both financially and militarily. If the U.S. reduces its support, Ukraine may struggle to maintain its defensive lines, potentially leading to further territorial losses. The uncertainty surrounding U.S. foreign policy has also made it difficult for European nations to coordinate their own responses, as many had relied on American leadership in shaping their strategies. Meanwhile, the economic impact of the conflict cannot be ignored. The war has disrupted global supply chains, particularly in the energy and agricultural sectors. Ukraine is a major exporter of grain, and the ongoing war has led to food shortages and rising prices worldwide. European nations, which had previously depended on Russian energy, have been forced to seek alternative sources, leading to increased energy costs and economic instability. Trump's statements suggesting a potential realignment with Russia could further complicate these economic challenges, as any shift in U.S. policy may affect global markets and trade relationships. Another key aspect to consider is the broader ideological battle that this conflict represents. Ukraine has become a symbol of resistance against authoritarian aggression, and its fight is being closely watched by other nations facing similar threats. If Ukraine were to fall under Russian control, it could set a dangerous precedent, emboldening other authoritarian regimes to pursue expansionist policies. The outcome of this war will likely shape international relations for decades to come, determining whether democratic nations can effectively counter aggression or if authoritarian powers will be able to redraw borders by force. Additionally, Trump's stance on Ukraine reflects broader divisions within the U.S. political landscape. While some conservatives support his push for disengagement, others see it as a betrayal of democratic values and long-standing U.S. commitments. The Republican Party itself is divided on the issue, with establishment figures advocating continued aid to Ukraine while more nationalist factions push for isolationist policies. These internal conflicts could influence U.S. foreign policy in unpredictable ways, especially as the 2024 elections draw nearer. The outcome of these debates will not only shape U.S. relations with Ukraine and Russia but also define America's global leadership role in the years ahead. The escalating tensions between Trump and Zelenskyy, along with differing international perspectives, underscore the complexities of achieving a peaceful resolution to the Ukraine conflict. As diplomatic relations continue to evolve, the global community remains watchful of the potential ramifications for regional stability and international alliances. The key question is whether Trump's rhetoric will translate into concrete policy changes that alter U.S. commitments in Ukraine, or if this is merely another instance of his characteristic unpredictability in diplomacy. Either way, the stakes for Ukraine and the broader international order remain incredibly high. As the world watches these developments unfold, one thing remains clear: the future of Ukraine, and perhaps the stability of Europe as a whole, may depend on the decisions made in Washington. Whether Trump's approach leads to new diplomatic opportunities or deeper divisions, the consequences will be felt far beyond the borders of the United States and Ukraine. The coming months will be crucial in determining the trajectory of this conflict and the role that the U.S. will play in shaping its outcome. If the U.S. pulls back from its commitments, it could lead to a reshuffling of global alliances, with nations seeking alternative security partnerships. This could, in turn, create an environment where China and Russia gain more influence, shifting the global balance of power in ways that may not align with U.S. strategic interests. The stakes could not be higher, and the decisions made now will have repercussions for years, if not decades, to come.